Hey there, and welcome back to the deep dive. Ready to jump into another stack of source material.
Absolutely. Today, we're continuing our trek through the Manual of Patent Examining Procedure, the MPP.
Right, that essential guide. This whole series is about trying to make that, well, dense manual a bit more accessible.
And this time, we're focusing on Chapter 1800. That's the one dealing with the Patent Cooperation Treaty, or PCT.
And even more specific than that, we're really zeroing in on MPP Section 1893.
Ah, yes, Section 1893, officially called National Stage U.S. National Application filed under 35 U.S.C. 371. Quite a mouthful.
It is. So our mission today is basically to unpack what 1893 says about getting an international PCT application into the U.S. system, the requirements, the steps, the whole framework.
It's a really specific path, and
Right.
sometimes tricky.
Yeah, and it's quite different from just filing a standard U.S. application from scratch under 35 U.S.C. 111A. That distinction seems really key here.
It absolutely is, because this 371 national stage entry, it usually happens much later. Way later than a typical domestic filing.
Like, how much later are we talking?
Generally, you're looking at entering the U.S. around the 30-month mark, measured from your earliest priority date.
30 months. Okay, wow.
And that delay isn't just, waiting around. It's often a strategic choice, a real advantage.
An advantage how?
Well, think about it. By the time you have to decide whether to pay those pretty significant U.S. national stage entry fees, you've often already seen the international search results, maybe even the preliminary examination report.
So you have more information.
Exactly. You know more about the prior art, how an examiner overseas viewed the claims before you start formal prosecution here in the U.S.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense strategically. So let's start with the basics then. What exactly is this national stage application under 35 U.S.C. 371?
Well, the MPP itself, in 37 CFR 1.9, defines a national application pretty broadly. It covers two main things.
Right.
One is a regular U.S. application filed directly under Section 111. The other is an international PCT application after it enters the U.S. national stage.
And how does it officially enter?
That happens when specific requirements are met, crucially, paying the basic national fee that's listed under 35 U.S.C. 41. That payment kind of flips the switch.
Got it. So MPP 1893 is essentially the instruction manual for that second type, taking the PCT application and landing it properly in the U.S. system via 371.
Precisely. It lays out that specific pathway, how the international application basically transforms into a U.S. application ready for examination here.
And again, the typical timing for that transformation is that 30-month deadline from priority.
That's the standard window, yes.
Which, like you said, is way later than the normal 12-month deadline for claiming priority if you were filing a direct U.S. application under 111E.
Right. That extra year and a half gives applicants breathing room, a strategic pause.
To see those international results.
Exactly. You see the international search report, maybe amend claims based on it, and then decide which countries, including the U.S., are worth pursuing. It can save a lot of money if the search turns up something really damaging early on.
Okay, makes sense. So let's say you've seen the international reports, you've decided, yes, let's go for the U.S. What are the absolute must-haves? What do you need to file with the USPTO for that 371 entry?
MPPP 1893 is pretty clear on the core items. You need first a copy of the international application itself.
Okay, the IA.
Now, often the USPTO already has this, maybe because they were the receiving office or the search authority. But if not, you got to provide it.
Makes sense. What else?
Second, payment of the basic national fee. And it's worth noting, you might qualify for the small entity fee, which is lower. Check 37 CFR 1.27 for that.
Right, the fee. Got it.
Third, if the international application wasn't filed in English, say, it was in Japanese or German, you absolutely must provide a full English translation. No way around that for U.S. examination.
English translation check. And fourth?
Fourth, you need an oath or declaration from the inventor or inventors.
Okay, the oath or declaration. Now, you mentioned earlier, or the sources did, that the rules for this depend on the filing date. Something about pre-AIA and post-AIA.
Exactly. This is a really key point where things changed. The America Invents Act, the AIA, shifted how inventor declarations work.
How so?
For international applications filed on or after September 16, 2012. That's the key date for these AIA changes. The inventorship is mainly established just by listing the inventors correctly on the application data sheet, the ADS.
Oh, interesting. So the ADS is the main thing for identifying inventors post-AIA.
It carries a lot of weight, yeah. You still need a declaration that meets certain requirements, but identifying who the inventors are is primarily done via the ADS under 37 CFR 1.76.
Okay. And what actually needs to be in that oath or declaration itself, regardless of AIA?
Well, you'd look at rules like 37 CFR 1.63 or 1.64. They spell out the required statements. Things like, identifying the application, the inventor stating they believe they're the original inventor, acknowledging the duty of disclosure.
Standard inventor declaration stuff.
Pretty much. And importantly, if you mess up the declaration somehow, maybe it's missing something or has an error, there's 37 CFR 1.67. That rule provides a way to fix it with a supplemental declaration without losing your filing date.
Ah, good. A way to correct mistakes is always useful. So that's the application copy, the fee, translation if needed, and the oath declaration. Anything else you might file at national stage entry?
Yes, you can also submit copies of amendments you made during the international phase.
Like changes to the claims.
Right. Amendments made under PCT Article 19, which are amendments to the claims after the search report, or amendments under Article 34, which happened during the optional Chapter 2 preliminary examination.
But you said can submit. Is there a catch?
There is. If you choose to submit them, you have to be really careful about the timing and the format. The MPP has strict rules for how those international amendments are presented at national entry.
Okay, timing and format are critical there. And speaking of timing, we keep coming back to that 30-month deadline. What happens if you just flat out miss it? Don't get everything in on time?
The outcome is pretty harsh. It's abandonment.
Just gone.
Yep. If you fail to complete those core requirements fee, translation if needed, oath declaration within the statutory time limit, which is usually that 30 months from priority, the application is considered abandoned by the USPTO. And generally, you can't just ask for an extension of that main deadline.
Wow, okay. High stakes. But what if you try? Like, you file most things by the deadline, but maybe you forget the translation, or the fee payment doesn't go through, or the declaration is missed. Is it still instant abandonment?
Ah, okay. That's a slightly different scenario. There's a bit of a safety net there, but it's on a timer.
How does that work?
If you make a timely national stage submission, you file something by the deadline, but it's incomplete, maybe missing the fee, or the translation, or the oath, the USPTO won't immediately abandon it. They'll send you a notice.
A notice saying what's missing.
Exactly. A deficiency notice. It identifies what you missed and gives you a set period to fix it.
How long do you get?
Typically, the correction period is 2 months from when the notice is mailed or 32 months from your priority date, whichever one ends later. It gives you a defined window.
Okay, so there's a specific grace period triggered by that USPTO notice, but I assume you have to meet that deadline.
Absolutely. If you fail to respond properly and on time to that deficiency notice,
Then it's abandonment.
then it's abandonment. So you get a chance to fix an incomplete initial filing, but you must act within the time frame set by the USPTO notice. Understanding that process is crucial.
Definitely sounds like it. Now, let's shift slightly. The U.S. plays a specific role in the PCT system, right? As a designated or elected office, how does that affect things?
That role is fundamental, yeah.
Yeah.
It means when the USPTO examines the U.S. national stage application, they don't start from scratch. They consider the work already done internationally.
Like the search report.
Exactly. The U.S. examiner looks at the International Search Report, the ISR, in the written opinion, the WOO, from the International Searching Authority. And if you went through Chapter 2, they'll look at the International Preliminary Examination Report, the IPER.
So those international findings actually influence the U.S. examination.
They often do. They give the U.S. examiner a head start on understanding the prior art and potential patentability issues. It often shapes the first office action you receive in the U.S.
So that strategic advantage we talked about waiting for the international results, it really connects directly to the U.S. process.
It does. It helps streamline things, leverages that international work. Now, remember those Article 19 and 34 amendments we mentioned?
The ones you can submit at national entry if you're careful.
Right. What happens if you made those amendments internationally, but you don't submit them properly, or maybe forget the translation, when you enter the U.S. stage?
Good question. Do they just disappear?
Effectively, yes, from the U.S. perspective. The MPP states clearly that those international amendments are not considered part of the U.S. national stage application unless they are properly submitted and translated right at the time of entry.
So if you miss that window.
If you miss it, they're treated as if they never happened during the international phase. If you still want those changes in your U.S. application, you have to resubmit them later as a formal U.S. amendment, following the regular U.S. rules like 37 CFR 1.121.
Wow, that's a detail you wouldn't want to miss. They don't just carry over automatically.
Not unless you handle them correctly at entry.
Okay. What about sequence listings? That's another area that always seems to have very specific rules, especially with PCT applications.
It certainly does, and has become even more specific with the worldwide adoption of WIPO standard ST.26 for biological sequences.
ST.26, right.
So PCT Rule 5.2 says if your international application discloses nucleotide or amino acid sequences, you must provide a sequence listing that complies with that ST.26 standard. It's usually submitted electronically.
And when should you submit it, ideally?
The advice is to submit it right with the international application on the international filing date. That's the cleanest way to handle it, avoids potential problems later.
Okay, filed internationally under ST.26. Now, how does that listing get treated when the application comes into the U.S. national stage under 371?
For the U.S. national stage, the USPTO requires an ASCII plain text file. They call it the sequence listing file. You submit it electronically or maybe on an optical disc.
An ASCII file, not like a PDF.
Nope, ASCII plain text. And this file serves a dual role in the U.S. It counts as both the official sequence listing required by the rules and the computer-readable form, the CRF. So you don't need to file, say, a PDF version separately.
Ah, okay. One file does both jobs. That's efficient. Are there size limits or anything tricky with that ASCII file?
Yes, there are practical limits. For direct electronic filing via the USPTO's EFS Web or Patent Center, there's usually a 100-megabyte limit for these text files.
100 megs. What if your sequence listing is huge, bigger than that?
If it's larger, the recommendation is to file the rest of your national stage documents electronically, and then submit the oversized sequence listing on a read-only optical disc, like a CD or DVD, on the same day.
Same day delivery to keep the filing date.
Exactly. And be aware there can also be extra fees for very large electronic sequence listings, especially if they go over 300 megabytes.
Wow, very specific tech requirements and potential costs there. Good to know if you're dealing with biological sequences.
Definitely. Getting the format and submission right is key.
Okay, one last area. What about claiming priority to an older non-PCT foreign application when you enter the U.S. via 371? How does that work?
Right, so your PCT application might claim priority back to, say, an initial filing made directly in Germany or Japan a year earlier. That earlier application wasn't itself a PCT case.
Okay. Do you need to prove that earlier filing?
Generally, yes. You need to provide a certified copy of that prior foreign application. It's best practice to submit this during the international phase itself, but if you didn't...
You can do it during the U.S. national stage.
Yes, but there are deadlines. For national stage applications that started on or after December 18, 2013, you need to file that certified copy.
And the deadline is?
It's the later of a few dates. 4 months from when the U.S. national stage officially began, 4 months from when you actually filed the 371 entry papers, or 16 months from the filing date of that prior foreign application.
Okay, specific calculation there. 16 months from the priority date seems like a common theme.
It is. And there are some exceptions, like if the priority document is available electronically through certain international digital library systems the USPTO participates in.
So even with the PCT simplifying international filing, you still have to track these domestic priority document rules.
You absolutely do. And one more thing on priority for post-AIA applications, those filed internationally on or after September 16, 2012. You also have to make sure that priority claim is correctly listed in an application data sheet, the ADS. If you fail to timely file both the ADS with the claim and the certified copy, unless an exception applies, you could lose the benefit of that earlier foreign priority date. Considered waived.
Another critical detail tied to the ADS for post-AIA cases. This covers a huge amount of ground, defining 371 entry, the core requirements, the timing pitfalls, AIA differences, amendments, sequences, priority. Section 1893 is really packed.
It absolutely is. Nailing down these procedures, understanding the deadlines, it's all fundamental to getting that PCT application successfully into the U.S. system and ready for examination. Avoiding those traps, especially the ones that lead to abandonment, is just paramount.
Couldn't agree more. Before we wrap this up, we definitely want to give a special thank you to Mike Shepard. He's the creative director who organized this whole audio series.
Yes, thank you, Mike. And now we have the necessary disclaimer.
Please note, this summary of the MPEP was generated using AI tools, including ChatGPT and NotebookLM, and may contain errors or omissions. It is provided for general educational and informational purposes only and is not legal advice or a substitute for formal instruction.
For authoritative guidance, consult the official MPEP, a qualified instructor, or a registered patent practitioner.
Thank you for that.
So, pulling this all together, maybe a final thought for you, the listener, to chew on.
Yeah.
We've talked about that strategic advantage of the 30-month window, right? Getting to see the international search results. But we've also talked about the really strict U.S. rules and deadlines for actually entering under 371.
Right. The need for the fee, translation, oath, all by the deadline.
Exactly. So how do you think applicants should best balance that? Balance the desire to wait and gather information from the international phase with the absolute need to have every single U.S. procedural duck in a row by that hard deadline to avoid abandonment.
That's a good question. It's like a tension between using the system's flexibility and respecting its rigidity, leveraging the international info versus meticulously prepping for the U.S. entry gate.
It's a key strategic calculation, isn't it?
Definitely something to think about. Well, that's all the time we have for this deep dive into MPP Section 1893. We really hope this discussion helped shed some light on this unique route into the U.S. patent system.
Join us next time as we continue our journey through the MPEP.